I first met Avelin when we were in ninth grade, and by the time we hit 10th, we were officially a couple. High school passed by smoothly for us, no major hiccups, no real drama. And in true cliché fashion, we lost our virginity to each other on prom night. That night changed something between us. After discovering that level of intimacy, we jumped at every opportunity to be close. By the time we were in the 11th grade, we had already started talking about marriage, but we agreed to hold off until after college. We had plans, a future mapped out. Everything seemed set. But college changed things, especially for Ava. Back in high school, everyone knew we were together, so most guys kept their distance. But in college, that unspoken boundary disappeared. Sure, a few familiar faces from high school were around, but the majority of the students were strangers, and to them, Ava wasn't Jack's girlfriend, she was just another beautiful girl on campus. And they made no secret of their interest. I noticed what was happening, but there wasn't much I could do. Our class schedules didn't line up, and with different majors, we barely saw each other outside of evenings, usually after I got off work. Meanwhile, Ava seemed to bask in the attention. She had always been naturally attractive, but now, guys weren't just admiring her from afar, they were making their moves. She became more flirtatious, her smiles lingering a little longer, her conversations with other guys a little more frequent. I'd often catch glimpses of her across the quad, laughing and chatting with guys who clearly enjoyed her company. She never seemed to notice me watching. Twice, when I cut through the student union, I spotted her in the cafeteria, once with one guy, another time with two. I didn't think much of it then. It never even crossed my mind that she was never hanging out with other girls, only men. But I didn't let it bother me. We were in love, planning a future together, so there was nothing to worry about. I figured it was just harmless socializing. After all, she always came home to me. Every night was proof that she was mine. Years passed. We graduated, landed jobs in our respective fields, got married, and settled into what was supposed to be our blissful life together. And for nearly 6 years, I was content, until the day everything changed. It all started on an ordinary afternoon at work. Eliza from the mailroom dropped a stack of files in my inbox, and as I skimmed through the top one, something caught my attention. It was an account handled by Wilder Beckett, an old classmate from high school. Halfway through, I noticed a glaring mistake. His projections were off by almost $3 million. Just as I reached for my calculator, Wilder rushed into my office, clearly in a panic. He needed the file immediately for a presentation with Apex. When I pointed out the error, his face went pale. He muttered something about fixing it fast before it caused any serious problems, then grabbed the file and took off. That Thursday night, as usual, Ava was working late finalizing payroll for Friday's payday, so I stuck to my routine. After work, I headed over to Finn's bar for my usual, a half-pound ground round and a couple of beers, before heading home. Just as I was finishing my burger and starting my second beer, Wilder walked in, spotted me, and slid into my booth. He ordered a beer for himself and told Lily to put my tab on his way of thanking me for saving his job earlier. I didn't argue. It wasn't a big deal. We talked about work, old classmates, and the usual small talk, until Wilder steered the conversation into unexpected territory. He took a sip of his beer, then looked at me with something like hesitation. "Jack, you're a good guy," he said. "But I gotta ask, why do you put up with Ava's behavior?" I frowned, not understanding what he was getting at. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then leaned in. "I mean, why do you just let her do what she does?" The confusion on my face must have been obvious. I had no idea what he was talking about. I told him as much, but instead of answering, he started to get up, like he regretted bringing it up. I grabbed his arm. "No, you don't get to drop that and walk away." "What are you talking about?" Wilder sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and finally said something that made my stomach turn. "Jack, I can't believe you don't know. Ava's been like this since high school. And yeah, I was involved." I stared at him, stunned. My chest felt tight. "What do you mean, like this?" Wilder sighed again, and went on to tell me everything, the kind of things that make you wish you could rewind time and unhear. 2 weeks after prom night, Wilder had walked into his cousin Henry's house and found Ava there, with Henry, and neither of them even bothered to look guilty. They just kept going. Wilder stood there for a minute, and when no one told him to leave, he stayed, waited his turn, and that wasn't the end of it. After that, it became a routine. Wilder and Henry kept seeing her whenever I was busy at work. Then, when Henry got serious with Arya Montgomery, Ava moved on to Wilder full-time, until he caught her with Theo Ryland and Owen Parker. Instead of backing off, Wilder joined in. The three of them kept it going until Ava had to leave to meet up with me. Wilder said she had a long list of guys, that she had been with more than half a dozen of them at the same time. I just sat there, completely blindsided. Wilder and I had been friends, sure, but not close enough for me to think he'd have any stake in lying about something like this. And at 18, with raging hormones, he admitted he didn't think my relationship with Ava was serious. After all, if it was, why would she be with every guy who showed her attention? And college? It was just more of the same. Ava's class schedule was light, Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday, no classes on Wednesdays. Her last class each day ended early, 1 p.m., maybe 2 at the latest. Meanwhile, I went straight from classes to work. So while I was punching the clock, she was making her way to someone's bedroom. Wednesdays? Those were all-day events. Wilder assured me that it wasn't like she was doing it every single day, just 2 or 3 times a week. Not that it made a difference. Most of our friends had been shocked when Ava and I got married. They figured I must have known what she was up to and chose to marry her anyway. Some thought maybe I was into it. Chase even speculated that Ava and I had some sort of arrangement, but they never saw me with another woman. Ava, though, she was constantly seen with other men. I felt sick. I had no clue. Not a single damn hint. Wilder looked at me with something close to pity. Jack, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but if you didn't know back then, you probably don't know about her Thursday night dates with Max and Luke Howard, or how she spends her Tuesdays while you're at bowling with Ethan Clark. I don't know who else she's seeing or how often, but one thing's for sure, whenever you're busy, so is Ava. He sighed, then added, it might not mean much now, but I want you to know, I stopped messing around with her after you two got married. It's one thing when a girl's single, but once she became your wife, I couldn't do that. I sat there, staring at my half-empty beer, as the weight of it all came crashing down. I don't even know what to say, Jack. And honestly, I have no idea what I'm going to do. But one thing's for sure, I'm not just going to sit on this. I need to take action. That was the only clear thought running through my head as I downed the last of my beer, pushed back from the booth, and got to my feet. I turned to Wilder. Thanks, man. For the burger, the beer, and for opening my eyes to the truth. The drive home was a blur, my mind replaying everything Wilder had told me. At first, I wanted to dismiss it outright. No way Ava loved me. She wouldn't betray me like that. But another part of me, the rational part, pushed back. Why would Wilder lie? What did he have to gain? The truth was he wouldn't. He knew I could verify everything. And if it turned out he had lied, our working relationship would be impossible. Even knowing the truth, continuing to work with him was going to be rough. But we'd get through it somehow. I thought back to those teenage years, raging hormones, bad decisions. If some other girl had made an offer back then, and I wasn't with Ava, would I have taken it? Probably. But that wasn't the issue now. The real question was, what the hell was I supposed to do? At that moment, I didn't know that Ava and I were done for good. If she'd had one drunken lapse in judgment, or even a brief fling, maybe, just maybe, I could have found a way to forgive her. But 10 years of outright deception? There was no coming back from that. That night, I lay in bed, pretending to be asleep when Ava finally got home from work. When she reached over to touch me, offering me some leftovers, I ignored her. The sickening part was, I'd been unknowingly accepting her leftovers for years. But now I knew. And her touch, once familiar and warm, made my skin crawl. For the first time ever, I felt absolutely nothing when she put her hands on me. I was up before her the next morning, coffee brewing, and the morning paper in hand. Ava, still groggy, asked about the night before. She'd come home excited to see me, only to find me already in bed. You were acting weird, she said, watching me closely. I kept my face neutral. Wasn't feeling great. Must have been something I ate. She frowned, but then smiled. Hope you're better. You owe me for last night. I forced a chuckle. Yeah. We'll see. The moment I got to work, I picked up the phone and called Leo, an old high school buddy who was now a corporate lawyer. I wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but I figured he'd know a good divorce attorney. His reaction told me everything. So, you finally found out, Leo muttered after a heavy pause. Damn, Jack. I thought you guys had some kind of open marriage. That was the only explanation that made sense. His words stung. No, Leo, I had no idea. Not until last night. Another pause. Then he sighed. All right, call Grant Foster. Tell him I sent you. I did exactly that, and within minutes, Foster and I had a meeting set for 1 o'clock that afternoon. At his office, Foster wasted no time laying out my options. It ranged from a smooth, mutual separation to a full-scale legal war. Since our state wasn't a no-fault divorce state, I could file on the grounds of infidelity, but to make that stick, I needed solid proof. Hearsay wouldn't cut it. I leaned forward. How do I get that kind of proof? Foster slid a business card across the desk. Everett Sterling, private investigator. His office is right across the street. He offered to call ahead, and I told him to go for it. The sooner this was over, the better. I also gave him the green light to start the divorce paperwork, promising to supply the evidence once I had it. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from Everett Sterling, who already had a plan in place. First things first, he said. You need to act completely normal. If she suspects anything, this won't work. I clenched my jaw, but nodded. As uncomfortable as it may be, he continued, you have to stick to your usual routine. If you and Ava are intimate 3 or 4 times a week, that doesn't change. Whether you initiate or not, go through the motions. This isn't about love anymore. It's about gathering evidence. And most importantly, don't alter her routine in any way. If she senses something's off, she'll get cautious, and we'll lose our chance. I swallowed my disgust and forced myself to agree. Back at the office, I picked up the phone and called Ava. We had long-standing traditions, dinner out every Friday, breakfast together every Sunday. If I wanted to keep up appearances, those had to stay the same. How about Troy for dinner tonight? I asked. She agreed without hesitation. While I sat there enjoying my veal marsala, Ava sipping her white wine, the team from Sterling Investigations was back at our house, installing wireless cameras and listening devices. I kept my expression calm, my voice easy. But inside, I was churning. I remembered Sterling's words. It's normal to be curious about the hidden cameras, but don't go looking for them. If she catches you, the whole plan falls apart. Also, force yourself to act natural in the bedroom. It's not easy unless you're an exhibitionist, but the system is motion activated, so you'll be on camera. Knowing someone might see you, don't let it mess with your head. There's a switch to disable the system, but most people forget to turn it back on. My advice? Leave it alone. Act like you're in control. After dinner, while recording a private video with Ava, I casually suggested we grab drinks and maybe hit a dance floor. She shot me down instantly. No, let's go home. You owe me for last night. On the drive home, she slid over, unzipped my pants, and purred, drive careful, sweetie. Wouldn't want me to bite your meat off if you crash? I almost shuddered. It didn't feel special anymore. It felt like a rehearsed act, something she'd done with countless other men over the last decade. And yet, my body responded. I clenched my jaw, letting it happen, because I had to play my part. By the time I pulled into the driveway, she was already urging me to hurry up to the bedroom. I couldn't do it. Not like this. Knowing I might be on camera, putting on a show for an audience, made my stomach turn. So before heading inside, I discreetly switched the system off, leaving my phone on the car seat as a reminder to turn it back on later. One way or another, this was coming to an end. I wasn't sure if Ava noticed, but that night wasn't about love. It was just me going through the motions. Unfortunately, once wasn't enough for her. She kept pulling me back in, and before she was satisfied, I had to perform 2 more times. By the time she finally let me sleep, I felt drained, but not in any kind of satisfying way, just empty. The next morning, as I laced up my running shoes, Ava reminded me she wouldn't be home when I got back. She had a long hair appointment from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m., and as usual, she mentioned how she'd probably end up gossiping with the other regulars and maybe grabbing lunch afterward. Could that have been true? Maybe. But after everything I'd learned, I doubted it. More likely, she was meeting one of her lovers, either before or after her appointment. As I left for my run, I made sure to turn the surveillance system back on. I wasn't expecting anything to happen while I was out, but I needed to make it a habit, ensuring that every time I left the house, the cameras were rolling. The switch only controlled the cameras, the listening devices and phone taps stayed on no matter what. After my usual 5-mile loop, I came back home, cooled down, and headed straight for the basement. Above my workbench, hidden inside a cabinet, was the equipment Sterling had set up. 2 receivers sat inside, one capturing the audio from the phone tap and listening devices, the other recording video from the hidden cameras. Curious, I played back the latest recordings. A familiar voice crackled through the speaker. Hello? Good morning. Are we still on for today? You bet, a man answered. The wife took the kids to the zoo, so we have until 6 tonight. You know I can't stay that long. I need to be home by 2. Any later, and Jack starts getting suspicious. He's already asked why I don't get home before then. Then skip the hair appointment and come over earlier. Yeah, sure. And what do I tell Jack when he asks why I've been gone for hours and my hair's still the same? Look, I want more time with you too, baby, but we have to take what we can get. My stomach twisted into a knot. I knew that voice. It was my cousin Sam. Ava had been sleeping with my own flesh and blood. Fury burned through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to lose control. I needed to gather everything, every shred of evidence, before making my move. An hour later, Ava strolled in as if nothing had happened. I had to suppress the urge to throw everything in her face right then and there. Instead, I played it cool. I faked a fall down the basement stairs, wincing as I clutched my back. Damn it, I groaned. Must have pulled something. It was the perfect excuse to avoid being intimate with her for the next few days. By Monday, I was ready for the next phase. I called Ava at work and told her I'd be leaving town on Tuesday for a business trip and wouldn't be back until Friday. Oh no, she pouted. That means you owe me a special night before you go. I forced a chuckle. We'll see. In reality, I wasn't going anywhere. This was all part of the plan. I traveled for work at least once a month, and Ava had always been home during my nightly check-in calls. But those calls varied. Sometimes I'd call at 7 p.m., other nights closer to 10. If she was cheating, there was no way she was sitting around waiting for my call before sneaking off. And if she was bringing men into our bed, I needed the cameras to catch it. That night, Ava snuggled up to me. I need something to hold me over for the 3 nights you'll be gone, she purred. Yeah, right? Luckily, my injured back gave me the perfect excuse to decline. Tuesday morning, she kissed me goodbye as I grabbed my suitcase and headed out. I made sure to keep my routine natural, stopping at the office and working a nearly full day before leaving at 3 p.m. Instead of heading to the airport, I drove straight back to our neighborhood, parked a block away, and pulled out my laptop. Sterling's software was already installed. A few keystrokes, and I had access to the phone tap. The line clicked. Hello. Ava's voice. Hey, handsome. It's me. What's up? Hubby just left on a 3-day trip. Ready to spend 3 fun-filled nights with me? A deep chuckle. Does a duck walk barefoot on the beach? I clenched my jaw. I'll take that as a yes, Ava giggled. I'll call Liam. Gotta get out of here and get to work. I'll be home by 6. See you then. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. There it was. The confirmation I needed. I picked up my phone and called Grant Foster. Have the papers ready for service by Thursday, I told him. And I want it done my way. Foster hesitated. That's going to cost more than the standard service fee. I don't care. With that handled, I drove across town and checked into a motel, a quiet little place with a bar and restaurant right next door. I had 3 days to kill, and I wasn't going to waste them drowning in anger. The bar was perfect. A country western spot with a jukebox full of classic tunes, the kind of place where people came to unwind. Every night, there were always a few single women who couldn't stand seeing a man sitting alone when there was music playing. On my first night, I was nursing a beer at the bar when a striking redhead sauntered over. Come on, sugar, she drawled. They're playing our song. Before I could protest, she took my hand and pulled me onto the dance floor. As we swayed, she leaned in. Don't get the wrong idea, sweetheart. I'm not looking for anything more. I just love to dance. Her name was Jenna. After our dance, she introduced me to her friends, Emma and Kate, and I ended up spending the rest of the evening at their table, dancing and drinking until about 10:30. When I stood to leave, Jenna smiled. Maybe we'll see you again? I'd say that's likely, I admitted. I'm staying at the motel next door, so I'll probably swing by tomorrow. For the first time since my conversation with Wilder, I felt something other than anger. A spark of something. Maybe not happiness, but a step in the right direction. The next afternoon, around 3 o'clock, I parked a block away from my house and reviewed the footage from the previous night. The 2 men who joined Ava in our bedroom were noticeably younger, at least 6 years her junior. I couldn't help but wonder if she was chasing the thrill of being with younger guys, trying to recapture something she thought she'd lost. The footage itself wasn't anything shocking, just straightforward lovemaking. It wasn't the visuals that got to me, though. It was the audio. Surprisingly, she didn't trash-talk me, which I'd half expected. But there was something unsettling about the way she reassured her lovers, telling them she had to be careful but that they'd have more time together soon. On Wednesday, nothing major happened, just more of the same. The only notable moment came when one of the men suggested seeing her more often. I can't, Ava replied. Jack is my priority, but we'll figure something out. Still, I overheard her instructing them to leave by 6 a.m. on both Wednesday and Thursday. She emphasized the need to be out before the neighbors, especially the early risers, might catch them. And, like clockwork, they left precisely at 6. That settled it. I called my attorney and changed the service date to Friday morning at 5:45 a.m. By then, there'd be no denying the truth. I sat in my car a short way down the street, the dashboard clock glowing 5:55 a.m. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady but tense. I'd been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it in my mind, but that didn't make it any easier. Right on cue, the front door opened, and the 2 men stepped outside. They looked comfortable, unrushed, like this was just another morning after a casual night with a willing woman. They turned, smiling at Ava as she leaned against the doorframe, her robe loosely tied, looking every bit the satisfied host seeing off her guests. That was when they noticed the man standing just off to the side. He stepped forward without a word, handed Ava the envelope, and turned on his heel, walking away as if he were delivering nothing more than a routine package. Ava just stood there, frozen, her hands gripping the papers. One of the men glanced between her and the retreating figure, his expression shifting from confusion to something closer to realization. I pulled up in front of the house at that exact moment. Tapping the horn, I got Ava's attention. She turned her stunned gaze toward me, and I gave her a casual wave, an easy, almost cheerful goodbye, before driving off without hesitation. I had nothing left to say to her. The paper spelled everything out plainly, but I had also included a letter, just to make sure she understood. I made it clear. I wanted no explanations, no excuses, no desperate pleas. I didn't care to hear why she did it. I wasn't interested in her claiming it was meaningless, that it was just physical, that it had nothing to do with how she felt about me. I wasn't about to sit through the same tired speech every cheater gives when they're caught. I didn't want her apologies. I didn't want her justifications. And I sure as hell didn't want to hear that we could work through this because of our love. There was nothing left to salvage. Dodging Ava's desperation. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Ava. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. And then again. 7 calls in a row. I ignored every one of them. When I got to work, I headed straight to my secretary, Nora. Just a heads up, I left Ava. If she calls, don't put her through. Nora raised an eyebrow but nodded without a word. As I reached for my office door, another thought hit me. I turned back. If she shows up here in person, tell her I'm out on a meeting. Make something up. Got it, she said with a knowing look. 5 minutes later, I walked over to the front desk and had a similar conversation with Cora, our receptionist. If my wife comes looking for me, stall her. Call me first. Give me time to get out the side door. I'll head to the cafe down the street and wait her out. Cora nodded firmly. Consider it handled. By noon, Ava had called 17 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. At lunch, I called my dad and my brother to update them on everything. When I asked Dad to break the news to Mom, I made one thing clear. Make sure she doesn't try to talk me into giving Ava another chance. I don't want to hear it. Dad exhaled through the phone. That's gonna be tough, son. You know how she sees Ava, like the daughter she never had. I know. But make sure she understands, I'm done. By the end of the workday, I still had some tasks to finish, and I wasn't exactly in a rush to head back to the motel. So I stayed late, catching up on things I've been putting off. At 5 o'clock, as she was leaving, Nora poked her head into my office. By the way, she said, smirking, your wife called 5 times before noon. Every time, I told her I had strict instructions not to put her through. I think she finally got the message. She hasn't called since. I exhaled, relieved. Appreciate it, Nora. Avoiding confrontation. By 7 o'clock, I was ready to call it a night. I stepped into the lobby, expecting to walk straight to my car, but before I could, Clay, our night watchman, called out to me. Hot date tonight with the missus. He joked. I frowned. Why would you think that? He nodded toward the parking lot. She's out there, waiting by your car. I clenched my jaw, forcing my face to stay neutral. Clay, we're getting a divorce. She wants to talk, but I don't want to hear it. If she knocks, don't open the door. If she tries the intercom, tell her you're alone in the building. My car's still in the lot, so tell her it broke down and I'm waiting for a tow truck in the morning. Clay gave me a slow, understanding nod. Got it. Been through 2 divorces myself. I know how it goes. Instead of heading to the parking lot, I slipped through the back exit, circled the block, crossed the street, and ducked into Benny's diner. Sliding into a booth with a clear view of the office, I ordered the daily special and watched Ava pace near my car. After a while, she walked up to the building and pressed the intercom. I couldn't hear what was said, but after a few seconds, she hesitated, turned away, and drove off. I finished my meal, had one last cup of coffee, then headed to a nearby bar for a couple of beers. A few women sat alone, eyeing me like they were hoping for a dance partner, but I wasn't in the mood. I had my drinks and called it a night. Saturday, tying up loose ends. Saturday morning was all about closing the final doors. First stop, the bank. I withdrew everything from our joint accounts, collected my personal documents and certificates of deposit, and left Ava's belongings untouched. Before leaving, I removed my wedding ring, placed it in a small box inside the safe deposit unit, and left it there for her to find. Next stop, breakfast at the Waffle House. As I sipped my coffee, I canceled both joint credit cards, ensuring Ava couldn't rack up any charges in my name. She had 2 cards in her own name, so she wouldn't be left stranded, but she wasn't about to drain our accounts. After breakfast, I returned to the motel, parked my car, and called a cab to take me to the nearest Avis rental. I rented the cheapest car available, making sure I wasn't using my usual vehicle. That afternoon, I lounged by the pool, a book in hand, ignoring the world for a while. Before dinner, I turned my phone back on. 9 missed messages from Ava. I deleted them all without listening and shut my phone off again. That night, I went back to the bar. The place was busier, the band was playing, and the energy was good. I found a seat at the bar, ordered a beer, and took a sip when I felt a tug on my shirt. I turned to see Jenna standing there, smirking. Hey, cowboy, she teased. Why are you sitting here alone when there's a seat waiting at our table? I chuckled. If I'd seen you, I wouldn't have wanted to assume. Would have felt a little presumptuous. Jenna scoffed. Nonsense. Come on. I followed her to their table, where Emma and Kate were already seated. Kate raised an eyebrow, glancing at my empty ring finger. Last time we saw you, you were wearing a wedding ring. Now it's gone. I met her gaze, my voice steady. Yesterday morning, I served my wife divorce papers. Left the ring for her to find. Emma grinned. So, does that mean you're free to pursue? I shook my head, meeting Emma's amused grin with a level stare. Not a chance, I said, taking a sip of my beer. The grounds for the divorce are infidelity. I'm not about to give her anything she can twist into a counterclaim. Kate smirked, lifting her drink in mock toast. Good. That means we still have a reliable dance partner. The rest of the night was easy, lighthearted. I danced with all three of them until closing, sometimes stepping aside to let them dance with other guys, but always finding my way back to our table. There were no complications, no expectations, just music, laughter, and movement. We agreed to meet again on Sunday. A new routine. The next morning, I spent the day stretched out by the pool with a book, letting the quiet settle over me like a balm. By Monday, it was time to head back to reality, so I drove my rental car to work, hoping that if Ava had been lurking, she'd think I was still out of town. The calls continued. 6 to 10 a day, every single one from her. I never answered. She tried calling from different numbers, but the moment I heard her voice, I hung up. She was persistent, but I was done listening. After work each evening, I made a habit of stopping by the bar for a couple of beers, letting the tension roll off my shoulders. Jenna, Emma, and Kate were there on Wednesday and again on Friday, so I joined them on the dance floor. On Wednesday, we stayed until 10, on Friday, until closing. By Saturday, I figured Ava would finally accept the inevitable, that I wasn't going to talk to her, wasn't going to let her back into my life. I was wrong. The first confrontation. On Monday, I returned my rental car and took my own to work again. That turned out to be a mistake. That evening, as I stepped out of the office, there she was parked right next to my car, waiting. The moment she spotted me, she got out, positioning herself by the driver's side door. "We need to talk," she said. I ignored her and kept walking. When I reached my car, she moved to block the door, placing both hands on it, eyes wide with desperation. "Please, Jack. Just let me explain." I exhaled sharply, keeping my voice even. "Read the letter that came with the divorce papers." She shook her head. "No, I need you to hear me out. I don't want a divorce. I don't want to lose you." I stared at her, expression unreadable. "Our relationship is over, Ava. You need to accept that. I won't change my mind." She opened her mouth as if to protest, but I wasn't going to let this drag on. With one firm push, I moved her aside. She stumbled but quickly caught her balance, her face a mix of frustration and sadness. I got into my car, rolled down the window just enough to speak through, and repeated myself. "If you want to talk, do it through our attorneys. That's the only discussion I'm willing to have." Then I rolled the window up and drove away. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong again. An ambush. Tuesday evening, as I walked to my car, 2 men stepped into my path. I recognized them immediately. They were the same guys I'd seen on the surveillance footage, the ones Ava had brought into our bed. One of them smirked, stepping closer. "Come with us." The other clamped a hand around my arm. "Ava wants to talk. Since you're being difficult, we're going to take you to her. One way or another." I sighed, glancing down at my suit and briefcase. Maybe they assumed I was soft, some weak office guy who wouldn't fight back. I could take them by surprise, create a scene, and let the commotion work in my favor. But then another thought hit me. If Ava was willing to go this far, sending men to physically bring me to her, what would she do next? If I sent these 2 back to her with bruises, how would she escalate? I exhaled slowly and let them guide me to my car. I sat between them in the back seat, my briefcase resting on my lap, and let them drive me back to the house I once called home. Inside, Ava stood in the living room, arms crossed. The 2 men flanked me, ensuring I didn't make any sudden moves. "We're not getting a divorce," Ava said firmly. I pushed myself up from the chair, but before I could stand fully, the 2 men shoved me back down, gripping my shoulders. One of them leaned in, voice low. "Don't fight it." I clenched my jaw. "This is kidnapping, Ava." She dismissed it with a wave of her hand, stepping closer. "We're married, Jack. That means we have to work things out. I know you're angry, but I can explain." I glared at her. "You don't need to explain. I know everything." She sighed. "You don't know the whole truth." I narrowed my eyes. "Oh, this should be good." She took a breath, as if bracing herself. "I have a medical condition, Jack. I've had it since high school." I scoffed. "You mean the condition where you sleep with half the town?" "Yeah, I got that memo." Her expression turned serious. "It's called nymphomania. It's real. And it's not my fault." I let out a bitter laugh. "You expect me to believe that?" She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. It started when we were teenagers. When you took my purity. I blinked. Are you seriously blaming me for this? She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. I've tried medication, Jack. All of them. They don't work. They make me feel sluggish, numb, like a zombie. And yes, I like the way I am. I love feeling close to people. But you have to understand, I never stopped loving you. I shook my head in disbelief. You think that makes this okay? She exhaled, steadying herself. It's not about okay. It's about reality. I need this. But it doesn't mean I don't need you too. I stared at her, struggling to process just how warped her thinking was. She took another step forward. That's why I made this. She pulled out a stack of papers. A post-nuptial agreement, she said, setting it in my lap. It gives me the freedom to be with whoever I need to for my mental well-being. In return, you get me as your wife, the same loving partner you've had for the past 6 years. I let out a sharp breath. You really think that's an even trade? She nodded. Nothing has to change, Jack. We've been perfect together. The only difference is now you know what's been happening. You can stop being jealous over something that doesn't hurt you. I stared at her, stunned into silence. Her voice softened. You're an amazing lover, Jack. You always satisfy me, but you can't satisfy me as often as I need. That's not your fault. It doesn't make you less of a man. It just means I need more. I clenched my fists. You actually think I'm going to sign this? She smiled, as if she'd won. Of course. Because you love me. I met her gaze, and for the first time, I felt nothing but disgust. Using her full name, the one she hated, I said, Fine. I'll sign it. But I have some amendments. She raised an eyebrow. Like what? I exhaled. I need time to think about it. I moved to stand, but once again, her thugs blocked my path. Trapped. I glanced at them, then looked back at Ava. At least let me use the bathroom. One of them smirked. Piss yourself. I exhaled sharply, shifting in my seat. The two thugs hadn't budged, standing over me like a pair of hired enforcers. Ava had given them their orders. Keep me seated. No exceptions. So, I did the only thing I could do. I relieved myself right where I sat. One of the guys recoiled in disgust. The other took a step back, wrinkling his nose. The hell, man? I shrugged. Ava said not to move. I follow instructions. The room was silent for a beat, and then Ava stormed back into the room. What the hell is? She stopped mid-sentence, eyes narrowing. Seriously, Jack? I didn't flinch. You're the one who wanted me to stay put. Rolling her eyes, she grabbed the document and read it aloud, as if dictating the terms of my surrender. Here's where you sign, she finished, holding out a pen. I didn't reach for it. Your guys are still holding me down. She waved her hand, dismissing them. Let him up. I stood slowly, straightened my jacket, and stepped toward her, placing my briefcase on the table. I took the pen, then flipped through the pages, scanning the fine print. She watched, waiting, probably expecting me to scribble my name and be done with it. Instead, I chuckled. Then, with deliberate slowness, I tore the document in half. Ava's eyes widened. Jack. I tore it again. And again. Then I tossed the shredded remains in her direction. For a split second, she just stood there, mouth slightly open. Then her shock turned to fury. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door. Jack, stop. Ava shrieked. I didn't. Her two goons scrambled after me. The first one reached for my arm, but I turned fast, swinging my briefcase straight into his skull. The thud was solid, and he crumpled to the floor. The second guy hesitated, caught off guard, and that was all the opening I needed. I drove my fist into his mouth, making him stagger back. Before he could recover, I followed up with a swift, brutal kick to his groin. He collapsed instantly, groaning in agony. But I wasn't done. I knew better than to let them get back up. Alternating between well-placed kicks to the ribs and sharp blows to the head, I made sure they stayed down. That was when I heard it. Click. I turned and saw Ava standing there, gun raised, her hand shaking slightly. Stop, she commanded, her voice unsteady. Or I'll shoot. I met her gaze, unfazed. Then do it. She blinked. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed. 911. What's your emergency? Yeah, I said, keeping my voice steady. My wife is threatening me with a firearm. My name is Jack, last name, and I'm at address. I need officers dispatched immediately. Ava's face paled. The operator on the line told me to stay calm and avoid provoking her, assuring me that help was on the way. I nodded and ended the call. Then, looking directly at Ava, I smirked. Thanks for making this easier. A felony charge should speed up the divorce nicely. Her grip on the gun tightened. You idiot, she hissed. When the cops get here, you'll be the one going to jail. It'll be my word against yours. You broke into my house and attacked my friends out of jealousy. Who do you think they'll believe? I scoffed. I think Clay and Joyce, who watched your two goons escort me from work against my will, might have something to say about that. Ava's eyes darted to the side. She hadn't thought of that. And I'll bet, I continued, that Dylan and Liam won't be too eager to take a charge for you. They'll turn on you the second the cops put cuffs on them. Her jaw tightened. I shrugged. You want to make a false police report? Go ahead. But the moment my witnesses speak, it's you who's going to be in deep shit. And when that happens, I won't be there to bail you out. Ava was still scrambling to think of a response when the flashing red and blue lights lit up the windows. A taste of justice. The police arrived within minutes. I stayed where I was, hands visible, letting them handle the scene. Ava immediately launched into her sob story, trying to spin everything in her favor. But the moment the officers reviewed the footage from Sterling's surveillance team, footage of Dylan and Liam physically holding me down while Ava waved a gun in my face, her little act fell apart. By Monday morning, when she strolled into court for what she thought was my bail hearing, the tables turned. She was arrested on the spot. By that evening, both Dylan and Liam had been locked up as well. They didn't stay loyal for long. Offered a plea deal, they turned on Ava instantly. She was left alone to face the consequences. Her lawyer called, suggesting I put the house up as collateral to cover her bond. I laughed and hung up. Instead, I checked out of the motel, moved back into my home, and changed every single lock. To ensure Ava wouldn't try anything else, Grant secured a restraining order against her. She couldn't come within 100 feet of me, not that she was in any position to do so. Freedom, at last. Despite everything, there was a moment, just a flicker, where I felt a temptation to reconcile. Maybe out of habit. Maybe because 10 years was a long time to throw away. But it passed just as quickly as it came. Ava had shown me exactly who she was, and I had no interest in ever seeing that woman again. By the time the trial wrapped up, Ava had been acquitted of felony menacing but was found guilty of unlawful restraint, filing a false police report, and a handful of other charges. The judge sentenced her to 9 months in county jail and 100 hours of community service upon release. Meanwhile, the divorce settled without issue. Aside from losing Ava, the only thing I had to give up was 20% of the house's equity. Fine by me. Once the money hit her bank account, I went straight to the bar near the motel where I'd been staying. I ordered a beer, took a long sip, and let out a deep breath. I was free. That's when I noticed Jenna and Kate sitting at a booth, grinning. I grabbed my drink and walked over. Mind if I join the celebration? Jenna smirked. What's the occasion? I shrugged. Let's just say the last bit of paperwork is officially done. Kate arched an eyebrow. So, the wedding ring's off for good, huh? I nodded. Jenna tilted her head, studying me. Why celebrate with us? I smiled knowingly. Well, I see Emma's wearing her wedding ring again. And Kate, yours is right there too. But you, Jenna. I leaned in slightly. No ring. No tan line. No mark suggesting there ever was one. So I'm guessing there's no long-haul trucker waiting for you at home. Kate laughed. Girl, you've been caught. Jenna rolled her eyes, shaking her head. So what? That's supposed to mean something? Yeah, I said, standing up and holding out my hand. Means you owe me a dance. She hesitated for half a second before slipping her fingers into mine. As I led Jenna onto the dance floor, I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time in a long, long while, I was finally free.